Hey, what's up guys? Dustin here, ATEM Off-Road. Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're going to be re-gearing the ultimate Dana 30 we've been building up in the last few episodes on this channel. As you can see right here, I got a few boxes. In this video, we're going to be installing a locker, new 513 gears, master overhaul kit, all new bearings and seals. And yeah, we have a lot of work to do. It's going to be a long one, guys, so let's get to it. So this is the ring and pinion gear set that I went with. It's Revolution gear and axle, pretty decent gears. And this is the part number. So I'm gonna go ahead and pull out my pinion gear. So that's your high pinion, reverse cut Dana 30 gears. And look at the difference between 355 and 513 gears. The pinion is much smaller. Everything else is going to be in this box, the high pinion Dana 30 master kit, where we're going to find all of the seals, the bearings, the hardware, the shim packs, everything we need to set up these gears. I did find on both sides of the new slinger and pinion gear some heavy coats of some kind of grease or something, and I went through with some brake cleaner and just cleaned them up really good. And you just want to make sure there's no grease or anything on the back side of the shoulder of this gear, because that can affect your pinion depth. Now originally I thought I was going to reuse the old oil slinger because I didn't know if the kit was going to come with a new one, and I think I'm not going to do that now, because on the original pinion depth setup, the only two components I could find that would make up depth are the inner slinger and the baffle, and together I've measured these at 79 thousandths for the pinion depth. Now for the new setup, the specifications for pinion depth are going to be for a Dana 30 65 thousandths. So my thoughts are, if I reuse the thicker slinger and press on the new inner bearing, I could possibly have too much depth, and then I would be stuck pulling off the new bearing. There's no way to kind of subtract the thickness from this setup. So using the thinner slinger with both the new baffle and the shim pack they provide, I will be able to add and subtract easier without having to, take this off if I come up too deep. So I think I'm going to go that route, and then we'll just go ahead and press on the new bearing. Alright, so the stack up on the pinion gear is going to be the slinger, and then we'll put the bearing on the shaft, and then our tool that we made. And then I'll flip this upside down and set this in the hole. Try to center this, and I'll stick this plate right here, and we'll press it. And I know that's good because the slinger doesn't move and it's nice and snug, and the bearing spins freely, so I think that's going to be good there. And then the tool just slides off. So I went ahead and just marked that this is the setup race for our pinion depth setup, and I'll just put that on the bearing. Now to add to the back of that will be this baffle, and then we're going to add some shims like we talked about earlier on the video. The components that made pinion depth for the original gears, and this is from the factory, so this is really the real starting point we want to start at, because they've already determined all of this for that axle and the variations when the axle was made. We measured 79, or let's call it 80 thousandths on the pinion depth, because the oil slinger was about 63 thousandths and the baffle was 17 thousandths. And then our new slinger and baffle is about 48 thousandths, and they want us to start at 65. So we're not far from the suggested to the original. We're about 15 thousandths. I feel like this will get us the closest, and then we could add or subtract. So I've set up the shim packs, 3 different versions. We'll start off with the 30 215s, and if we're too deep, we can pull out some and just put in the 25, or if we need to add, because we're too shallow, we can just add 5 thousandths more and see where we're at on the pattern. So that's kind of how we'll fine tune the pinion depth, is, you know, running a pattern. And we'll go ahead and set that on the oil baffle. So the depth is done. Now we're going to work on our pinion preload. So we've got 7 shims here that totaled up to 0.72 thousandths, and I'm basically going to copy that and build a new shim pack. The 3 24 thousandths will stack up for 72 thousandths, and check preload. I've got this bearing race driver set. We'll use the 72 millimeter to drive in the outer bearing race for the pinion, and we'll just grab parts to assemble it. You just want to make sure the backside of the seat for this race is going to be flush. There's no burrs or anything on the backside. Make sure it's really clean, because any type of burrs or anything back there will cause this to not seat properly, and that is going to be super important. So whenever you hear the pinging noise, that's the race hitting the back of the shoulder, letting you know that it's seated. I'm going to put a little bit of oil on this bearing, that way it's not on there dry. Then we'll install the 32 thou shim pack, 17 thou baffle, and the setup race, and then the pinion. Preload shim pack to the back shoulder. We'll add the outer bearing and slinger, and then we'll add the new yoke. Then I'll go ahead and add my washer and then put the nut back on. And we're just going to run this down until the nut stops. Alright, so that's at least 150, so I think we're safe to say that we can check the preload. This is a beam style torque wrench. It's got this indicator pointer, and depending on the rotation that you're turning it, it'll either move left or right, and then it's in inch pounds. So I'm going to go ahead and put the socket on, and we'll go into the clockwise, and I'm getting about 11 inch pounds that way, and we'll move in this direction as well as almost 12, but I'm getting about 11 inch pounds in both directions. So that's actually not enough preload. The specs on this is anywhere from 12 to 16 inch pounds on the preload, and I'm just not getting enough here. So this all has to come back apart, and I'll subtract maybe 3 to 4 thousandths on the shim stack, and we'll come back in the morning and recheck this. All right, so we're back, and it's a new morning, and I've got everything put back together. We've subtracted about 4 thousandths. So we've brought the preload shim stack down from 72 to 68. And I'm just gonna go ahead and torque this main nut here. We're right in between 10 and 20. So we're about 15 on the preload. And I think that's gonna be perfect. Anywhere from 12 to 16 is gonna be good. So we got it on the second try. Not the first, but I think we're gonna be good as far as preload goes. And now we just need to start working on setting up the carrier. So let's talk carriers and start building one up for the axle. Now this one on the left came out of the donor axle from my TJ. It had factory 410 gears. And the one on the right is out of the high pinion XJ axle with factory 355 gears. Now there's a carrier brake between the two gear setups. So anything numerically higher than 373s, you would switch over to this carrier supporting all of the gears and up. So since we'll be using 513 gears, this is the carrier we're going to need. And anything from 373s down, 355, 307s, you would use this carrier. And then we'll also be replacing the spider gears for a locker. Got to pull off the ring gear, strip these down, and then start building it back up. So here's our bearing, pretty much unharmed, looking pretty good. And the race, so we'll use these for our setup bearings. And then our shim pack. So this is going to be the non-ring gear side. We'll keep those together. And then we'll flip this over and set up the ring gear side. And there's the ring gear bearing. Go ahead and set the pulley back, put that all away. Check this out, the old bearings that I pulled off of the carrier from the TJ axle. Look how worn out these are, and this is only about 160,000 miles. You can see the delamination and the pitting in the rollers on the roller bearings. So just thought that was interesting. Figured I'd mention it and share that with you. So I'm about ready to install the locker I've chosen for this front axle. This one is made by Powertrax. It's their no-slip version as an automatic locker, and it's designed for on and off-road. So if you're one of those who likes to drive up to the trail, hit the trail and drive back home, this might be the locker for you. I'm super excited because it's designed to eliminate that ratcheting or clicking noise while you're on the road. It's got this sync track technology. Let me go ahead and open it up. Inside the box, this sticker, the user manual, installation guide, and your drivers. So these are the synchros right here, and it's basically like a spring mechanism that kind of acts like a smooth operating limited slip on road, and then you get that automatic locking traction that you need on the trail. So that's kind of the design or how it works, and all the parts seem of good quality. I'm going to go ahead and get this thing installed. Now I've done some research in regards to the fitment of this locker in some Dana 30 carriers. So I've kind of just put together the locker, dry fit it inside, and I can't rotate it. It's definitely the case that has that problem with fitment. So I'm gonna have to take this back apart and figure out a way to grind down or Dremel down the clearances on the inside of the case. That way we can rotate the locker. So I've got one side done, and that's spinning freely. Go ahead and pull this out for you so you can see what it looks like. So we'll flip it around and do the other side. And there's the other side. Really didn't take off much, just to barely clear, like maybe two millimeters. There you go, it's spinning. So looks like we did good. Clean up the carrier with some brake cleaner, and then we'll finish installing the locker. We've got our springs right here. They want us to take some heavy wheel bearing grease. This is what I got. And just coat the springs and get them all loaded into these slots of the driver. Alright, so I've got all 8 of the springs installed. I'm going to flip over these drivers and coat the teeth with some grease as well as coat the spacers. We do need to line parts up in a specific fashion. So on the tooth side of the coupler, there's a wider gap with a missing tooth. We'll have to have this section facing toward us inside the carrier. We've got these pins back here, and on the opposite sides of the pins are some slots, and that's what the other driver is going to engage with, just like so. And on the opposite side of the slots are going to be another wide gap where there's missing teeth. That's essentially where the spacer is going to set in. You can see how it's kind of just floating in there, and there's some movement. We'll have to line that up with the coupler facing us. So the pins are going to go in first, and essentially the spacer will be sandwiched between the coupler and the driver. And you just want to verify that it's engaged. So the teeth have just engaged, and we can now spin the locker. So that's good. Install the other coupler, and we're going to do that with the gap facing away from us, 180 out. So there's the gap right here, and we want to put that gap going in first. And then we'll add the spacer like we did on the other one. Let it float, kind of center up the paddle with that middle tooth there, and then we'll go straight in. Then we should be able to rotate this. See, now we can rotate it, whereas we used to not be able to. And then we can add our pinion pin. Now the hole to lock the pinion pin is going to be on this side. So I'm going to go ahead and just stick the checker tool inside there and go ahead and drive the pin in. You want to make sure the hole is up, and we should be able to drive it between all of the parts that make up the locker. Okay, we'll just straighten out this. Verify that everything is engaged and our springs haven't jumped out. All looks pretty good. We'll go ahead and finish tapping it in. Line up the hole. Alright, looks like we're good. Make sure we can go through, get it all centered, and we can pull our little checker and then add our roll pin. So got it started, and then I'll take my roll pin driver, just like a center punch for roll pins, and we'll hit it in the rest of the way. There it goes. I just felt it stop. Alright, so now our locker is installed. And now we could add the springs to this side and this side of the locker. We have a little spring and a larger spring, littler one inside the big one, and essentially get it started inside the spring seat on the driver, inside the slot. So, and then you could take like a pick and just push it down, and it should pop right in, and it should be good there. Then we'll move to the other side and do the same thing. Start the spring on the bottom, get it nice and flat, and then we'll push this side down my pick. You just want to verify that both sides of the longer, smaller spring are in the spring seats and they're secure. So this one is a little bit loose. I'll check it with my checker here. So if it fits with the wider way going in, there's something wrong. But if it fits with the smaller, it's just right. So I think we're good now as far as fitment. It passes. We can now install the ring gear. These are the 10 bolts that bolt the ring gear to the carrier. The master overhaul kit came with some blue Loctite, so we'll just add that to each bolt. And this is the ring gear. Just kind of checking over the quality, the backside, making sure there's no burrs back here. Take a file and just kind of glide it across. Make sure there's no burrs on the back. And I'm thinking that's pretty good. We'll go ahead and spray it really good with some brake cleaner. Wipe down the back, as well as the carrier. We'll go ahead and clean that as well. Really good. Align the bolt holes, kind of get it straight on there. And that's looking pretty good right there. We'll go ahead and add our bolts. Alright, so I've got the carrier in my vise with some soft jaws. I'm just going to go ahead and torque these bolts in a crisscross pattern. Just evenly torque them to 55 foot-pounds. So I've spent the last hour or so making up these setup bearings for the carrier. And they just slide on real nice and easy like. And also building up some shim packs. So the carrier is ready to accept some shims so we could run a pattern. This is what I've come up with for my best possible starting point for the preload on our carrier bearings and just the starting point in general for our pattern. Now on the 355 carrier, after I pulled off those bearings, we had somewhere around 56 thousandths on the shim pack for the ring gear side, and on the non-ring gear side I pulled a shim pack of 37 thousandths. And then for the 410 gears carrier, when I pulled off those bearings, I pulled off a 55 thousandths shim pack on the ring gear side, and on the non-ring gear side a 37 thousandths. So the same exact shim packs on both gear setups and 1 thousandths difference on the ring gear side. So my best possible starting point is building up these two shim packs that came from the master kit. We've got 55 thousandths for the ring gear side and then 37 thousandths for the non-ring gear side. Not final, but starting point for our shim packs on the carrier. So the non-ring gear side will get a 37 thou shim pack, setup bearing. Flip this around. And the ring gear side, 55 thou shim pack, setup bearing. So I've got my case spreader. I'm going to share with you how I'm going to set this up, and essentially what it does is it opens up the case just enough so you can drop in and out the carrier. It makes things a little bit easier, maybe even a little bit faster once you get it set up. It's considered the proper way to install and remove these carriers, but you could also hammer it in with like a rubber mallet or a wood block. Now I'm going to get my dial indicator all set up so we can measure the amount of spread. We don't want to spread this axle housing more than about 20 thousandths. Anything beyond that, you can possibly damage the housing, and we don't want to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and start tightening this up. Now you can see 0 is here and we're almost to 20, and then we'll stop. And now we can drop in the differential. right, so I think we're seated. Go ahead and just rotate it and see. Oh yeah, and we have a backlash. So after getting the bearing caps torqued down, I noticed there was no backlash in the carrier. So I'm gonna have to take this back apart and change up some of the shims. So to increase backlash, what you'll do is you'll take some of the ring gear side shim packs and you'll move them over to the non-ring gear side. And that should move the ring gear away from the pinion gear, increasing backlash. Now on a high pinion, this is how you check backlash. On a low pinion, you'll actually check the bottom of the gear. And we're getting exactly 10. So we're on the very high side of the specs, which is between 6 and 10. Too much backlash at this point. I'm gonna have to pull the ring gear back out and remove some of the shims from this side and put them back over to the ring gear side. So now I'm too far out. I need to bring it back in. For the third time, we've got 46 on this side and exactly 46 on this side to equal up 92 on the total shim packs for the preload on these bearings. And then we've got the dial indicator set up to 0. And I'm just checking backlash. And I'm getting a 7 on the backlash. So this is good enough to paint some gears. Put a little bit of gear marking compound mixed in with a couple drops of gear oil. And I like the consistency. So let's paint the gears. Place my glove here and just kind of load up the pinion as much as I can while going in the forward direction about 5 times. Now I'll click it and go into reverse. All right, so I've got the gear set on the workbench so we can kind of interpret the pattern, see what it's showing us, and come up with a strategy moving forward. So as far as the drive side, that's looking really good. I think we hit it right there. We might be a little bit too deep, but I'm really liking how it's in the center between the root of the tooth and the top land or the crown of the tooth, and riding right in the middle between the heel and the toe. So I'm really liking that. As far as the coast side goes, it is favoring more of the heel, but overall it's not bad for our first go. We just need something to compare it to. Now when you analyze these gear sets, you want to look at both the ring gear and the pinion. And the pinion is definitely showing us that we are a bit too deep. As you can see, the contact pattern on the drive side of that tooth is riding a bit high, kind of wiping on the edge of that top land of the tooth. And it could definitely come down more. So in order to do that, we'll have to reduce our pinion depth about 2 to 3 thousandths, and we'll watch that just to see if we get a better gap between that top line and the contact patch. So up on the screen, I'll share with you the strategy in shim pack settings for both the carrier and the pinion. Just be aware that whenever you change depth for the pinion, you will change preload. And then we'll run a pattern and see if anything changed. Alright, so I'm back at the workbench with the gear set, and I've just been comparing the last pattern to this pattern, and I feel like we found the sweet spot, and it's definitely satisfied our needs in moving that contact pattern down closer more to the root on the pinion, where it's no longer riding the edge of the face of the tooth. So I'm more comfortable running with that setup. I really like the 78 thousandths over the 80 thousandths on the pinion depth. And I think the move to remove the 2 thousandths on the pinion shim depth is definitely going to be the right move to make. So now I'm getting ready to remove all the setup bearings and all the setup tooling that I used to set this up for the pattern, and I'm ready to start putting it back together for its final build. Press in these axle shaft seals. Got one in. We got to do the other side now. Well, it's not as easy as I thought this tool would make it, but it did the job. Got the 17 thou baffle, 31 thou shim pack. Then I've got my driver and the new race. Now if you can't get a hammer back in here because the driver's too short, you just take a socket, slip it over with an extension, and drive it home. Alright, so I'm ready to install the pinion. I added some grease to the splines for the yoke, and then also added some gear oil to the bearing. Make sure your slinger is tight. If your slinger comes loose, you're gonna have to repress your bearing. So let's get this thing installed. I've got a 67 shim pack bearing and the outer slinger. Oh yeah, that's looking good. So this is the new seal. The other one that came in the kit, it's not national. This one actually came with the new yoke that I have. It's gonna take some red grease, put it inside the seal and on the back. That's looking pretty good right there. So I also added some grease to the area where the seal is going to seal on the shaft of the yoke, and then as well as a little bit of grease right here where the nut is going to spin. Red Loctite to the inside of that nut and just a drip on the threads. I'm going to flip the axle around and we'll torque it. Alright, 220 foot-pounds. Got a 47 thou shim pack with a new bearing. Now I cut this off of one of the old bearings on the TJ axle. I think I'm just going to use that to help press that in. And for the non-ring gear side, we'll add a 46 thou shim pack and a new bearing. Everything looks good here. All right, so we'll install the caps and torque those down to 60 foot-pounds. So it's a new day, and I've kind of been just analyzing these patterns, just trying to see what else I could have done. Maybe I could have done something differently. But overall, I think I'm just going to button it up here at this point. I'm actually pretty satisfied with the pattern, the way it's looking, and it's well within specs. I've just been checking the Backlash, and that's about between 7 and 8 thou on the Backlash. As far as the drive side on the contact pattern, it's showing that we have good depth. We're not too deep, not too shallow, somewhat centered in between the root and the crown of the tooth. Overall, I think it's going to be a solid setup. Now, there is going to be a break-in procedure for the gears and the locker. While we're doing the gears, we're going to be breaking in the locker at the same time. So we're going to fill up this axle with some 80-90 conventional gear oil. Just make sure you have a good high quality oil, and then we're going to do some driving procedures. Idea is to get the axle warmed up and then rapidly cool down. You're going to do that 3 or 4 times during the first 100 miles, and then there's other procedures that they're going to do within the 500 miles. I even like to go 700 miles, but you're not going to want to get your speeds above 60 miles an hour, no heavy acceleration, and no towing. So you're going to have to plan all of this ahead and just take it very seriously. The break-in period is very important. It's not just setting up gears, it's also following through with that, because you could have gear noise and all the other things that come with bad break-in procedures. So overall, I'm thinking this is going to be a success for now. We still have to break it in and get it installed in the Jeep. But yeah, I'm really excited. This thing is looking awesome. I just got the metal cloak diff housing cover all painted up, and we're going to install it here in the next video with the axle and a few other parts that I need to get done on the front end, so we can start working on the rear end and getting the Dana 44 re-geared. I've got to get this smogged sometime as well in the process within the next week or two, so I'm going to be busy. And then it's been really hot where I live, so I've been fighting that as well. I'm working on getting a controlled climate inside here, maybe get some kind of split unit to keep this area cool, but it's just been hot. I really want to just get up to the hills and do some camping. But overall, I'm really happy with the outcome, and yeah, I'll leave all the links in the description box below for all the tools and the materials used in this video. If you're interested, check that out. Feel free to leave a comment, and I hope you guys learned something, and if not, you enjoyed the video. So we'll end the video here. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next one. Have a good day. Peace out.